Today, we're going to talk to Dr. Tom McGinn from Omaha, Nebraska. Tom is a gastroenterologist who sees and treats patients on a regular basis with various disorders that come about as a result of excessive alcohol use. We're going to spend a whole lot of time learning about the effects of alcohol on our bodies. Tom's insights shed light on the concerning rise in alcohol-related diseases and deaths, and he shares some of the key tests and indicators you will need to find out if your liver is at risk. Not to worry, though, we also discuss some preventative and restorative measures as well. I get to share some of my health improvements in my own alcohol-free journey. Let's listen in. Welcome, Tom. I am so happy to have you. I really wanted to have a doctor on this show, and I go, my friend, Tom. And you were so gracious to talk to me about it. So I'm looking forward to this conversation because people know that alcohol is not necessarily the healthiest thing, but I think having this truth come out about the realities of what's going on in the world and how many people are really being harmed, I just think is a helpful conversation. So, welcome, and let's just start with before the show started, I had to ask him if I was pronouncing gastroenterologist right. So let's just start with, hey, what do you do? What do
Oh,
you do?
that's a good place to start, Roseanne. Well, yeah, I am a gastroenterologist, and our field is gastroenterology, which is a field of medicine that obviously deals with the the gastrointestinal tract. That includes everything from the esophagus all the way down through the GI tract, plus the solid organs of the pancreas and the liver and some others. And gastroenterology is a subspecialty of internal medicine. It's
Mm,
not a surgical field, but it's a field that the practitioners, the physicians in gastroenterology practice a lot of procedures and endoscopic procedures. And many people see a gastroenterologist now with the role that colonoscopy plays and colon cancer prevention. Often someone will have an encounter with a gastroenterologist just if they're perfectly fine for screening. But we're also there for the other issues and diseases that we see with the GI tract.
yeah, and I was just wondering because I didn't know this, and you might because you're not a cancer specialist, but I found out probably a year or two ago that alcohol affects like 7 different types of cancer. One is throat, right? And I think colon cancer, is that
Yes. Yeah.
okay? And I mean, I know you don't
Breast.
know this, but I was shocked. Breast cancer, that's huge. I mean, it's it's crazy. And so, because and I'm an alcohol specialist, but people are starting to, be curious about how other drugs. So if you see anything else as I ask you the questions, whether it's alcohol or another substance, feel free to chime in. But as a doctor, what are you seeing coming up that's alcohol or drug related in your practice or just in general in the industry? Like,
Yeah. Well, as a gastroenterologist, we do go into the hospital and see patients who are hospitalized. We see patients in the office and like I said, in the endoscopy centers. Let's talk about the hospital, where I spend about a third of my time still, and I may spend a week or two at a local hospital. And we see people admitted to the hospital for various gastrointestinal problems. But what's happened in the last 3 years has just been remarkable and something that we've all picked up on, in that it's a lot of alcohol-related disease. And we'll see younger cases of liver failure, from alcohol, complications of pancreatitis, and alcohol withdrawal syndrome. GI doctors often get called when people are bleeding from their intestinal tracts. Often that's an alcohol-related issue. But I'll be in a hospital and doing consultations on patients, and then we'll be following a certain number of patients. And there's been times where we'll have 9 people we're following in a hospital, and every single one of them is, a victim of alcoholism.
Mm.
And these are very ill people. And go on and talk about the types of diseases that we see
Yeah,
from
please.
alcoholism in the hospital. Let's talk about just liver failure, liver effects of the alcohol. When the alcohol affects the liver, the first stages of that are fatty liver, then you can get an inflammation of your liver, and then lastly, in cirrhosis. And it can take some time before you get cirrhosis, but sometimes patients will present with liver failure, and that's the first time that they realize that drinking was taking a toll on their body. I remember as an intern, 31 years ago at the University of Colorado in Denver, and this is 1988, and it was like in the height of the AIDS epidemic. But it was also a city hospital, and we saw plenty of alcohol-related issues. And we're having these younger, middle-aged people come in with an inflamed liver, hepatitis from alcohol, and they're jaundice, and they're in the hospital. And you get them to stop drinking, but often half of the patients that we would see in that position will go on to die within 60 days.
Wow.
As a very young doctor who, went through medical school, and medical students imbibe probably often more than they should. And growing up, alcohol was just part of society, and we'd talk about alcohol affecting the liver, maybe causing liver tests to go up, but I didn't realize how deadly having alcohol hepatitis was until I was an intern, and we were losing people, from that disease. And then people go on to have the complications of then cirrhosis, and then we also see patients with pancreatitis. Alcohol can cause the pancreas to get inflamed. It's a horrible disease, and people are in the hospital for days. If there's any disease we see that keeps people in the hospital longer, it's probably pancreatitis.
Yeah, I had a friend who had that once back in San Diego, and I think he was in a coma for a long time. And it was drinking related.
Mhm.
His
Yeah.
body was just shutting down and blowing up,
Yeah.
and it's a miracle that he came out of it. Um,
And after that damage is done, then we find that people can end up coming back if they even just have a small amount, relatively small, social amount of alcohol. It's as though they've been primed, or their pancreas is very sensitive to any effects, and it's got some effects on the fluid that the gland makes, and probably predisposed recurrent bouts of pancreatitis with any more drinking. And so these are people that are really kind of reached the bottom of their health, and they're in that moment, and it's a crossroads for them, where we can tell them real clearly if they want to get healthy, but they can get healthy, and if they stop drinking, they can. And talking with a patient in that position, letting them know how what's going on, giving them more awareness to it without any shame or anything, realizing that they have a choice, and they can stop drinking, and the liver can improve, and pancreatitis can stop, and give them some sense of hope. And actually, my experience is that although a lot of people in that condition go on to die of their disease, alcoholism, we do get a fair amount of people. I follow dozens and dozens of people that were in that position, stopped drinking, and they were able to turn it around. But unfortunately, they are the minority. But you're right, Roseanne. The numbers are kind of staggering. What we're seeing in the last 2 or 3 years, and perhaps it has something to do, with what the world and country's been through with COVID to
Yeah.
some degree, and there's maybe some other issues as well.
Well, we've always had a few. I think our mental health issues are rising. COVID just dramatically increased that. And let's face it, we use alcohol to cope with a lot of stress. At least I know I did, not only to have fun, but to cope with stress. I'm curious when you ask people about, let's just say you see them in the hospital or maybe even the doctor's office, and is there an indication that there's severe alcohol involved, or is it just one of 5 questions that you ask? And do you think patients are honest with you about their life? Like, I talked to so many people, including myself. I was never honest with my doctor. Now, if I'm sitting in the hospital and with liver disease, I might I might mess up, but
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's you never know.
right,
Um, but it's also so important in the manner in which you're talking to someone, and to remove if it can remove the incentive to try to lie about it, to make them
right,
feel like you care. Like it's not a real, ethical or judgmental issue. I have, I'll round on people in the hospital, and sometimes and someone will tell me about their alcohol use, and we'll leave the room, and the nurse practitioner will say, "Boy, they wouldn't tell anybody else about it," and as like, well, you sit down on the bed, you talk to them, try to get a rapport, and listen. And so much of that has to do with just the patient interaction. That's important, and not let them try to be shamed about it and that. And it's
yeah,
extremely important. But you're right. There's no magic set of questions. I mean, as a young doctor, we were talked about the 4 questions you could ask about looking for an alcohol with the cage questions of cutting. Have you ever think about cutting back? Do you get angry if somebody talks to you about your alcohol? Are you guilty about alcohol? Do you have an eye opener in the morning? And if you answer yes to three or more of those, that was an indicator that you might be alcoholic. So there are some ways to explore that some, and there's some laboratory tests that kind of give it away as well, that correlate a bit with alcohol consumption.
that's what I was wondering, if there's this indicator that goes, "Oh, there it is." So, pretty
Yeah,
much there is.
there's some suggestions in that, but
What
it's
do you
important.
I'm just curious, what is it? What is that?
Well, alcohol will affect the red blood cells and
Oh,
make
okay.
them enlarged. In a $12 CBC, complete blood count, um, can can indicate it a bit with an elevated blood size, MCV. Some of the liver tests are induced by alcohol more than a GGTP. The ratio of one of the liver tests, the AST to the
Mm,
AST, is suggestive. And there's one fancy blood test that I ordered so rarely, and I forget exactly how to term it. That I won't even say. But I've had patients who needed a liver transplant, and they did not want to. They didn't admit to any drinking, but there was suspicion they might drink. And a liver transplant unit generally won't accept a
they
patient.
won't. They won't. I know that for a fact.
And rather, and somebody's in liver failure and they're 32 years old, and it's the first time they've ever gotten sick, and it's their alcoholism, and they probably have. So they say they've stopped drinking for 6 months, but a liver transplant, there are some blood tests that are very specialized that look at an enzyme, and liver transplant services can kind of use that to indicate if someone's really drinking or not. But we really don't rely on that.
Well, that's good because I I have run into that where if you have liver disease and you need a transplant, you won't go on the list if your liver problem is from alcohol. But what about those people that legitimately quit? You know, i- it's good
Well,
to
they need
know that maybe there's a possibility, you
yeah,
know.
and it's there. They have to show it with proof and enroll in a program, say AA is the famous one, and do monthly urine tests and drug testing for alcohol, and have the data there for a year of proven sobriety. Really. And they can come into a transplant program then to deal with the complications of their cirrhosis, and have an acceptably low recidivism rate. Of they don't want to go back to drinking after a transplant.
Oh gosh, no, I can't. I would imagine that's enough to scare you because I have to
Right.
imagine, anytime you do a transplant, rejection is the biggest risk, right? And
Yes.
I have to believe inflammation and alcohol would really increase the likelihood of rejection. I'm not a doctor, but I just think this makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you seeing, most of my clients are 40 and up, but I have kids and that range in age from let's see, 26 to 38. And I find that the kids are drinking stronger and heavier amounts than when I did. So of course I'm a little bit concerned because my drinking kind of went over decades. It just went higher and higher and higher. My tolerance just kept increasing, right? I wasn't the sloppy, like fall on your face. I hid it a lot from people because my tolerance was so high. But what I'm concerned about the younger generation and what I'm seeing is just this binge drinking. And I'm trying to keep track of a lot of studies that are coming out of National Institute of Health. There's one comment they said cirrhosis of the liver is expected to triple by 2030 due to alcohol. Triple. That's only 6 years away. You're going to be a busy doctor.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You know, I'd have to look up the data to see that if, you know, young people in binging has always been a thing, but you got to think it's worse now because
Are
I
your
think the
patients
patients
getting
we're seeing,
younger?
yes, they were seeing, more liver patients, liver failure patients, patients with cirrhosis at a younger age, and yeah, it must have to do with higher amounts of alcohol at a younger age. And, alcohol consumption, alcohol sales has only gone up
Mhm.
significantly, about that same 30% as we're going to be seeing with an increase of liver disease. Um, if I may, this liver failure and cirrhosis epidemic that we're going to be seeing here in 5 to 10 years is real. And hepatitis C and hepatitis B used to be the big causes with alcohol, but it's from the fatty liver.
Hmm.
It's probably worth a couple minutes. We'll talk about fatty liver.
Yeah,
We
I'm
know that.
curious because I always thought that was from sugar or too much fruit or something like that. What it,
Yeah, but
it
and that it is to some degree, but the first stage of alcohol liver disease is the fatty liver, and fatty liver is also seen without alcohol, and that it's got that term non-alcoholic fatty liver disease,
I have heard of
NAFTL,
that.
NAFTL, that you might have heard of. Well, NAFTL's now gotten a new name. They don't call it that anymore, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because you'd have somebody who drank, binged, okay, a young person binging on the weekend, who's got a fatty liver. And is it the alcohol that they binge occasionally, or is it the fact that they might be a little bit overweight or unhealthy? So there was when enough people to really truly non-alcohol fatty liver disease. So they now called it metabolic associated liver disease. And it's a fatty liver disease, but you can have a little bit of alcohol without being, alcoholic and obvious alcohol cirrhosis, but drinking, but also our diet. And it's leading to this condition called fatty liver, which, 60 to 80 million Americans have.
Fatty
And
liver.
it's
Wow.
right. Yeah, and it's increasing. And it can go on and cause liver failure, liver transplant. And they are thinking the liver transplant utilization is going to go up 30% in the next 5 to 10 years. But the bigger issue is that, fatty liver. I used to think, oh, yeah, a fatty liver. It's an early sign of liver disease. It's why your liver tests are up. Tell a patient that 20 years ago. Well, in the last 10 years, I can tell a patient who's got fatty liver, this is a bad sign. This is a
Mm.
sign that you're metabolically not healthy and that you're basically pre-diabetic. You have insulin resistance. And you may not have diabetes now, but your pancreas is being overstressed, and you won't have diabetes until you do. But this is a marker that in 5 years you can. And this insulin resistance is part of this metabolic unhealth that so many people have. In fact, 85% of us are metabolically unhealthy. And it's probably the cause of so many of the chronic diseases, neurodegenerative diseases like dementias, some of the cancer you mentioned, and heart disease. And, I mean, it's what all the modern diseases are. These diseases that are probably related to metabolic health. And alcohol probably causes as much havoc on the metabolic system as anything. I mean, alcohol is a poison that does not allow us to, burn fat. It makes us.
Oh, did I
slow.
find that one out? And
No.
a lot of my clients, yeah, when I go through the initial conversation, especially women, they're just like, I'm just gaining weight. And that's the thing I noticed is it was, unless I quit drinking, there was no way I was losing weight. And by the way, when I drank, the salami and cheese tasted really good. So, yeah, it got to be a super big issue for me, the weight, and I think it is for a lot of women and men. One of the questions as you were talking, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, and I've read, when your liver's failing you, you don't necessarily have a lot of signs. And I'm going to have a two-part question. So one is like, are there signs before it's serious? And the second one is, you mentioned fatty liver disease is a signal. Is that something that you can test for in a blood test on a normal physical? Like, if somebody's a heavy drinker and they're listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I wonder if my liver is affected." What do you do?
Well, to screen for fatty liver, there is some blood tests you could do. You could check. The most sensitive one might be an ALT, amino.
That's okay. ALT is good.
And the ALT, so we got to watch out for that, because some of the laboratory tests will say a normal is between 45 and 60. And somebody came back with a normal ALT of 50. Well, people shouldn't have an ALT of 50. It's just that so many of us have fatty liver that it's affected the normally. The lower the ALT, the better. But even with a fairly normal ALT, still can have fatty liver. Physical exam is useful. I examine everybody's liver when I examine. I can usually tell if it's enlarged. That can be a sign. And an ultrasound of the liver is very inexpensive and easy to obtain thing. It's kind of definitive thing, and to look for fat in the liver as opposed to MRI, which are.
But I don't
very
think
expensive.
a lot of doctors are doing, like, I go to trying to think like more of a holistic doctor. So I know I've heard and seen that before, ALT, and I'm good. And we can talk about that later, that your liver can heal, because I'm super healthy right now. But I don't think that those tests are normal doctor tests. So I ask a lot of people, how's your health? And they're like, yeah, I know. I go to the doctor. My liver's fine. Like, do they really know?
No. And you asked, is there any early sign that you can tell before there's significant disease in the liver? There really isn't.
I know.
When those signs and symptoms start developing, it's fairly end stage usually. If somebody has jaundice or fluid building up in their abdomen, or intestinal bleeding, or the complications within the brain of cirrhosis, those are very end stage. And for years, somebody develops a tolerance to the ethanol and can tolerate this poison pretty well. And all the while, subclinical, you can't tell, damage to the liver. And unfortunately, some of the first manifestations of the disease are, here you've got a cirrhotic liver, and this didn't happen overnight, but there's really no ways of. So getting a diagnosis of fatty liver, I think, is very useful. I've had just last week, I've had a couple patients that Man, well, we could talk about interventions for fatty liver, but if they go ahead and lose 30 pounds in 6 months, and I'll recheck their liver tests and they're normal, and I can, the liver is no longer enlarged. It's reversible, the fatty liver from, both alcohol and, from the modern, lifestyle and modern diet, but both very, very reversible. But you got to stay on that type of lifestyle. And unfortunately, kind of our modern lifestyle and diets aren't conducive to that. So it is reversible and worth knowing, though. You're right, Roseanne.
Yeah, that's it regenerates. I know my youngest son got in a bicycle accident and he split his liver. Luckily, the sac wasn't engaged, but he spent a lot of time in children's hospital not moving. But that's when I found out that, the liver is one of the few organs that can regenerate, except and unless you get to a stage. Is that stage called cirrhosis? Is that the stage where there's the no return? Where's the stage of no return?
Well, the cirrhosis is there's scarring in the liver, and the scarring will be there, but the function of the liver can return, and people can live pretty healthy and feel normal with cirrhosis. Yeah, that you get to a certain point, and even if you stop drinking, it can progress and you lose patience. I just had a young guy I've been following for 2 years, and he stopped drinking, but he was still jaundiced, couldn't get a liver transplant. And I just, learned that he passed. So there's something else. There's probably, like you said, that inflammation, going on in the liver, all these pathways that get activated, and even at a certain point, once you stop drinking, it can still be too late, unfortunately. But yeah.
But that's what we're trying to do is really educate people. Um, I know for the generation that's behind me, don't do what I did. uh, and I'm grateful, but one of the things that I think, well, I don't want to encourage anybody, but I never really, to my knowledge, knew of any severe liver problems I had other than I was puffy. That's something you see a lot in people that drink a lot. Super puffy faces and
Mm-hmm.
red.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
May
but
I ask, did your blood pressure ever be a problem?
oh, amen. Yes, that was
That's a
my big
very common.
thing. Yeah. So in my testimony, I knew, I knew, and I was starting to look at this. I needed a doctor had said, you need to start watching this. You need to go on medications. So I was on a regular basis in the 150s over 94, 95, so super high. And then that is one of the testimonies I have after 90 days of not drinking and walking. I had lost over 20 pounds. My blood pressure, I remember recording it at 117 over 79. And ever since, my blood pressure has been, yeah, stable. And resting heart rate, too, I think goes with that, too. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, yeah. So,
Yeah. I think it is a under-recognized cause of hypertension. And yeah, we can, get on e-prescribe and get you on medicines in probably a minute, a couple clicks. That's not the problem. You recognize the problem, the alcohol, and its effects on your metabolic health. And that was part of that fatty liver, prediabetes, insulin resistance state with hypertension, truncal obesity, and some laboratory tests that they're part of that insulin resistance that alcohol is a big driver on. And by eliminating, alcohol, your metabolic health improves, our insulin levels lower, our kidneys work better, and can release some of the salt and fluid out of the body. One can become normal tensive, all just because of a restoration, of the balance the body should have that it's not going to get with chronic alcohol ingestion and hypertension. Yeah.
yeah, I went from a very sickly person. As a matter of fact, in 2019, I had sepsis and nobody knows how I got it, but guess what? I think I know how I got it. Every time I got sick, does excess alcohol cause because the doctors would come in and they're like, I don't understand. You're not a drug addict. You're and
Well, it had something to do with your leaky gut, I bet,
I bet.
and the effect that alcohol has on the microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some mechanisms that get worked out on that. But there's no
Yeah.
question that intestinal integrity and a leaky gut is one of the complications of alcohol, and it can lead to inflammation and infections and sepsis.
I did not know that. Thank you. I did not know that excess alcohol also caused leaky gut because a lot of people, this is my other thing, like a lot of people are going to coaches, like health coaches, and trying to change all their diet. And it's just so taboo to say no alcohol, and they're still trying to have their 1 or 2 glasses of wine a day and address leaky gut. So
Right.
that's, I
Yeah.
find,
Yeah. Well, we could spend a moment on my thoughts on the diet, but alcohol is a big part of that. And the fact is, it is a major part of our society and our social fabric and our interactions. And we come across people, and the people have reason to drink occasionally, but if you have the disease, it's not controllable. So you just have to not drink at all. But there are a lot of people that can manage and have drink occasionally. But I think a good cutoff, I tell folks, is 2, for a woman, maybe 4 for a man for the week.
Oh, for the week. Whew.
For the week.
I was going to say, if you said per day, that's over the government's.
I know. Well,
I was like, wow, 2, that's kind of generous, but per week.
It seems like somebody who's not going to, become an ex-patient of mine. I mean, what's something they can live with? It seems to be a very tolerable number, and I think it's well within it's under the limit of, say, an alcohol use disorder and that. And I think it not going to have, too profound. So I do have so kind of a low limit, 2 a week, maybe 4 for the week. But then the diet, that's, we see people with reflux and Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, fatty liver, and all kinds of conditions, pancreas issues, and I really kind of advocate for the same diet. And that's, their sugar intake, and alcohol is a kind of a sugar. It's alcohol sugar, 5 carbon alcohol sugar. And that includes fructose, or like you said, too much.
Right.
Modern fruit, a little bit is good, but high fructose corn syrup, which is produced by industry.
Oh, that's just deadly, right?
It's in everything, right? I just found it. They've been doing studies on honey. You buy honey, and they were able to find it even in some of the honey that's being sold.
Are you kidding?
No.
Oh my goodness.
So high fructose corn syrup, alcohol, vegetable oils, the seed oils like canola oil, corn oil, they poison, the mitochondria. They contribute to this metabolic dysfunction in the fatty liver. Okay. And then excessive grains, perhaps. So that's kind of the spiel for folks. And, alcohol, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, vegetable oils, and too much grains. And a lot of folks, a little older than I see, and can get by on 2 meals a day, form of kind of a time restricted feeding. That's very good for fatty liver. I recently found out that coffee is very helpful for fatty liver.
Oh, good, because I drink so much of it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, very protective, Roseanne. Very protective.
That's why my liver is doing so well. Coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another statistic that I've seen thrown around. It's probably on the high side, and I'm sure this is opinion, but it's like 95% or greater than 90% of all doctors' visits are due to inflammation in the body. And I this is why I do what I do. I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me this? Right? I used to be so sick, and I'm so healthy now. And
yeah, it's so true. And it ages people. It just ages people. The effect of alcohol on the body, on the metabolism, I don't want to go into details in that, but it kind of generates an imbalance of the oxidative reduction potentials of certain areas of the cells, and like NAD and NADH. I mean, I've been studying those enzymes since we were in med school and that. But recently I found out through some readings on longevity, some of the work that David Sinclair's done, that NAD is a very potent longevity factor and can keep cells and the DNA young. And nothing depletes NAD more
Mhm.
than ethanol, you know, the byproduct acetaldehyde, and all the metabolic downstream effects that alcohol has depletes the body of
Of
NAD,
everything,
and
you
it just
know.
ages the cell more than about anything. Right. So
I know, and there's all these warnings for the limits and everything, but I feel like we're at this point in society where you and I may be the same age. I might be a little older, but um, the cigarette days. Remember, it was cool to smoke cigarettes. Everyone smoked. Did you smoke cigarettes? Did you ever smoke?
maybe back in college, I tried it a couple of times, but not much.
Yeah, but I was a heavy, heavy smoker. But that was the cool thing to do. The Marlboro Man, the commercials, all the TV, everybody was smoking in those days. I'm trying to think, Dean Martin, some of the old
Yeah, yeah,
big names, and the Virginia Slim woman. And I even remember you could probably do an internet search, your doctor recommends Camel Lights. And soon somebody finally said, and I'm not sure how the industry got this way, but hey, this is killing people. I literally think we are there with alcohol. It's just like, who's going to stand up and say something? We were talking before this started about the difference between alcohol and drugs. I think it's in 2022 or 21. 140,000 just in the United States, alcohol-related deaths, versus 106,000 deaths from all drugs. That's including fentanyl, right? All drugs. And so we're like, fentanyl, fentanyl, fentanyl. And alcohol is like, I don't know, 3 times,
yeah, yeah.
fentanyl.
We have a war, the war on drugs, but there's never a war on alcohol. You know,
Yeah.
I live in a state that has no tolerance, or it's very illegal for any cannabis products and that. But it's here in the state that I live in. People consume it illegally, but
It's
they have
legal
access to it.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't. There's some kind of rare gastrointestinal issues associated with that, but nowhere near the profound effects that alcohol has on people's health. And w- I know there's probably a lot of information on there. Why that isn't the case? Why do you think that's the case, Roseanne? Why has there not? What's impeding a war against alcohol?
Um, I have to believe one is the big alcohol companies and all the money that they're putting into, the political coffers. I think that when we stand up against alcohol, because it is so socially acceptable,
Mhm.
that we're like, oh, you're no fun. Like, and that's what I'm trying to do is change like the whole Alcoholics Anonymous and go, I'm like not doing alcohol and my life completely changed. Like, oh, used to be way overweight. I'm like healthy. I'm enjoying life. I'm not anxious anymore. I'm trusting God. I'm walking with God. Like life is better, but it's so hard to see when you're in the midst of it. And I know because I try and influence my kids and go, "Hey, maybe you could go substance free." Are you
Yeah,
kidding, mom?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's not even in the realm of comprehension because it's so associated with fun. And somehow I think The National Institute of Health, try NIAAE. I think it's National Institute of Alcoholism, Addiction, and something. But they keep putting out statistics, and I keep seeing them go like this, and I just keep trying to talk about it so that people can. And the other thing is, it's an invisible line, right? You walk it, you don't think there's a problem, and you walk through this door that you don't know you walk through. And then you try and you're like, oh, I think I should slow down. It's all I can do is keep
Yeah.
talking and hope people listen.
Well, the tobacco industry faced a lot of lawsuits from people who had, basis in terms of their injury or diseases or deaths, and they get sued and lost huge amounts of
That's
money.
probably how it's gonna happen.
Those things could happen perhaps in the alcohol once more evidence is related to, there's somebody's cirrhosis. Could you go out and sue a distillery or something? I don't know the legalities of that. I'm not. I don't think that's going to be industry changing, or and the industry is not going to do it. I don't think the government thus far. They could do more. They haven't. They could tax alcohol more. Perhaps that would give some distance.
Well, I think better labeling at a minimum, you know, causes inflammation, cirrhosis of the liver, fatty liver. Check with your doctor before yeah.
Right.
I labeling is probably the best way to start because that's how I feel like I lacked awareness when I engaged.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Warning: this is attractively
Packaged poison.
packaged poison. What a great line.
I stole it from somebody.
Yeah.
But it is. Yeah, I think that's the place we have to start. And I don't know, I would hope the medical industry, I don't know how that happens, but
Yeah. I mean, and we're kind of are a bit focused on the sick and all the complications of the liver disease, not so much the prevention. And
right.
there's probably economic reasons for that. So the industry of the medical industry, unfortunately, we've got isn't incentivized as a whole. A lot of doctors are very caring and want what's best for their patients, and are going in that direction. But I think what it's going to take is to try to really incentivize this for people to get their health back. And the ones that are doing it were found that incentive through some means, and cut out alcohol, or maybe cut their sugar addictions, or their follow a better diet, and really got healthier, and they're paying the dividends. And they may be less apt to get sick down the road. And there should be an incentive, and financially, perhaps even to be a healthy person. But
Yeah, I'm all in for that. These insurance companies are just paying astronomical
right,
costs for the actually that's who should do it, right? That's who should do a campaign about
that's right,
incentivizing people for
right,
no alcohol
right,
because they
right.
have the most to benefit.
That's a very good point, Roseanne. I mean, if you're a driver, an automobile, and you keep getting speeding tickets, I mean, you will be incentivized quickly, right? Or in accidents, to slow down and be a better driver. And that's at the car insurance business. But with health insurance, it's a little differently, isn't it? The individuals don't have so much of that incentive to say they don't drink, they don't smoke, they have a normal body mass index, BMI. And yet they're still paying maybe the same premium as
Well,
somebody
and
who
that's
does.
it. Like, so the sickest people, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. Well, you and I aren't gonna solve it, but we are talking about it, which is more helpful than anybody helped me
Yeah,
with.
right. We're brainstorming here.
Yeah, yeah, you have given us so much good information, and, I've learned a lot today too, because I thought, I knew a little, but yeah, I always thought there was no way to figure out if you had a problem unless you ran into a brick wall, but now we know. What's the test? NLT, ALT, ALT.
Oh, an ALT. It's one of the liver function tests, very common one, along with the complete blood count, and an ultrasound of the liver can be useful, to do if the ALT is in the higher range.
And oh, yeah, I do want to. I just remembered. So this is something that you said that I love because I learned this years ago from my more holistic health coaches and doctors. So when you get a blood test and you see ranges,
Hmm.
those are ranges for the average. And so if the average human being is overweight, or I forget what example you used, has inflammation, being average does not mean being good, right?
Right, right. The average man now is 5'9" and weighs 190. And 30 years ago, the the average man was, I think, about 5'9", maybe, and was about 170. So it's normal to be 190. That's probably not normal's not necessarily healthy. And you're right, that does apply to some of those lab tests as well.
Yeah, and I just went on a health kick, after that's kind of what you do. You get rid of it, you go, "Wow, my life is getting better." Like, how can I make this better? How can I reverse all the damage I did to myself? And yeah, I was so proud of myself when I had my first set of like really big blood tests. She's like, "Wow, you are really healthy. Your immune system is good." And I'm like, "I don't drink." She goes, "That's got to be it because I'm over 60 and I don't really have any medications that I'm
Oh,
on." So,
wonderful. You
yeah.
feel better, right?
Plus, I
You-
feel better. I am empowered, confident,
Yeah.
not stressed. I mean,
Well, I'll see people in the office, and this is patients with end stage organ disease are there, but the common thing is the patient going to a doctor because they want to feel better, and then you explore their alcohol use and say it's in that normal whatever range that is. And it's like if and this is something that comes up every week where I can just be frank and say, listen, I'm going to see you in 3 months. But in the meantime, if you want to feel better, I want you to just not have any alcohol for 3 months. And I guarantee you will feel better.
can you recommend my devotional?
I
I
have
got that's a
recommended
new market for me, gastroenterologist.
it's a great
Yeah,
book. And
thank
as you
you.
know, I've read that, and it's got lots of wisdom in it. And I have recommended your book to a couple patients. Result.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, Tom, I feel enlightened and I feel honored that you took the time to talk to me and educate people. There's just a lot of things to know about
Yeah, well, it's
alcohol.
great, and it's a great message you're getting out, Roseanne, and it's great to see you doing so well with this, and I was happy to be a part of that.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Until next time.
Very good.